Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Keys to AWS Optimization, where today we're going to be, as John said, vibe coding to make some fun product. I don't even know if that's a real term. John, you just said it to me, and I was like, yeah, let's go for it.
I think emerging, right? Like it's yeah, I see like a little bit more and more, every single day.
Loving it. So we're going to be looking at how you can use Amazon Q, specifically developer, to make some tools to analyze some data for you. So we're seeing this massive increase in people being able to quickly create code or analyze data with just some commands. And John's going to walk us through how to do that. But before we get into it, John, have you had a frugal week or a splurgy week?
Um, I think I'm going from splurgy to pendulum swinging back to frugal. We had kind of a busy weeks in our family with like some birthdays and stuff. So now we're starting to starting to get frugal again after having a lot of fun.
I bet they're a balancing act of having those two all the time. I know what you mean. If you watched last week, you might have heard me mention that I went to the UK and Ireland Strongest Woman competition in Glasgow, which was a nice little splurgy time. Came top 10 in the combined nation, which is pretty cool. So
That's awesome.
that was pretty fun. Thank you. But it was still, if you can hear, and I'll be trying to mute myself throughout, have a chest infection, so I'm a little bit poorly. But I still managed to go, and I still want to talk to you guys about this awesome topic. So let's get into it. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Steph Gooch. I'm a senior SA advocate here to help you with all of your FinOps journeys. John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Massey. I'm a principal optimization solutions architect on the optics team. So I've been with AWS for just going on almost 5 years now, helping customers work backwards from their cost efficiency goals.
John, have you got your orange badge yet?
July, yeah. So we're coming up on
July.
probably 6 weeks or so. So
Perfect.
exciting.
For those who don't know, when you get to 5 years, you get a new color badge, and it's a goal that I feel like I must be just a little bit behind you on that. Guys, remember, anytime you can ask us questions or put comments in the chat. We have some people saying, hi, everyone. Travis found the on Twitch, there's the emoji of me, or whatever it is. Yeah, emoji of me lifting from a throwback from a few years ago. Feel free to drop that in the chat. And top 10, congrats. Thank you very much. Let's oh no, it started. Let's get into the topic at hand. So, John, what was the inspiration for you suggesting this topic for today?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like we said, vibe coding is starting to like kind of catch on as a term, and I think there's some like positive and negative, kind of connotations that come with it sometimes. And for folks that maybe aren't familiar with it, it's this idea of using some of these AI powered coding assistants to really drive a lot of the code creation, and building applications, building tools. And in a lot of cases, you're not writing any lines of code at all. And you can just use your voice to, kind of guide these AI tools like Q Developer to go through and create your tools. And I think, this is one that fits really well in the FinOps space. There's been, some concerns from folks that like, hey, does vibe coding, maybe miss some of the important design decisions that come with application development, and I think that's a valid kind of concern to have if you're writing code and maybe not looking very closely at it. But I think one of the things that we see with the FinOps space is that there's a big need for like data analysis code, going through, looking through like big segments of data, doing a lot of joins, combining data sources, enriching data, making things more accessible to folks, doing more reporting, getting recommendations over to people, kind of turning, data into action. And those are a lot of cases where it's data analysis stuff that's tedious to go through and do. And if you don't have a coding background, it's complicated or it's time consuming, even if you do have a coding background. So I see that as like a big strength. And we've had a lot of traction, like within, our team and our customers of being able to kind of solve some of those like pain points around data analysis stuff by creating, tools and little applications that can help make that a lot easier. And those are cool use cases that we just thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of highlight and walk folks through what does this actually look like in the real world.
Yeah, so the examples we're going to go through is kind of twofold. One is like John's examples that he's got for us are going to be showing you kind of how to analyze things like your compute optimizer code. But the other part is that we want to be inspiring. We want you guys to see the power of things like Amazon Q, whether that is especially the developer portion. So just to go into what that is. So Amazon Developer, it's taken over what used to be Code Whisperer is a big part of it. But you've obviously seen Amazon, or hopefully seen Amazon Q in the console, which is your chat, so you can ask simple questions. But in this case, we're talking about something that you can actually connect in to things like your IDE. So I use mine in Visual Studio. I've got the Pro license or the paid for license for it, and it's advanced. So it can start to write queries, write code for me. It can provide suggestions in my actual code lining. I've used it a lot to develop things like tests for stuff, for building our infrastructure as code, for demo accounts, for explaining stuff to me. One thing that I really enjoy with Q is that I can ask it questions about Amazon, about my account, about my code, but also just general, especially if you've been watching for the last few weeks, I've been doing a lot of Gen AI sessions. And sometimes I just want it to explain what Gen AI concepts are to me like I'm an idiot. And it will write it in a nice, digestible way with examples. And it's a really powerful tool. Just for folks who might want to know the terms of pricing of how you used Q Developer, specifically, it's a per month fee per user. I think it's about $18 a month. I just checked. Yeah, something like that. And you pay per
I think
month.
it's 19, but yeah, it's right there. And I don't know if there's any regional differences, but
it's same as QuickSight. That's the way we want everyone to think about it. Same as QuickSight licenses. But what it will allow you to do is get that more advanced feature. Just a quick tip: you can set up. You only pay for actual active users. And when you do this, keep an eye on what users you're allocating to pay for it, because we've seen customers with QuickSight do a similar thing where they let everybody have access to it and not everyone uses it. And then they're spending all this money on licenses they don't need. So be mindful of that. One thing you can actually do is in your Q Developer console, you can set up an export to see what people are utilizing in terms of the Q Developer and start to look for any idle users. We just want to make sure that people are able to see what their spend is. Before we get into that, I would love to do a quick poll for the audience. So in the chat, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Have you tried Q Developer? Let us know just by dropping the number in for what you have done. That will let us do it. I've only just recently kind of set up the Pro license on my account, mainly to get some playing around with it. A couple of no's, couple of yeses. Awesome. Okay, like a mixed crowd. Don't forget, guys, throughout, you can always drop any questions in, and we want to be looking for some feedback on this so we can make sure that we make this a nice and interactive episode so we get your prompts in as much as possible. Okay, so a bit of a level playing field. Some people have, some people haven't. John, let's get into it. Let's start with developing. Do we need to share any other information before we get started?
No, I think we can just jump right into it. We'll kind of talk through things, as we go. And Steph, just like you said, I mean, I'd love to hear kind of like feedback from folks, in the chat, like about tools that maybe they've built already in the past, any ideas maybe they have for projects that they want to take on with this, kind of as we walk through examples. And if you have suggestions for what you'd like to see us build, in the future, feel free to drop that stuff in the chat as well.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's get into it. So
cool.
This is your IDE, right? Visual Studio, and you've already set up your developer setup for this,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, so I've got an icon that's just right over here on the left for Q Developer. And that's what gives me this chat window on the left-hand side. And I've got kind of 2 tabs that are already open here that are some notes we're going to kind of reference as we walk through this and build out our 2 demos. Just like you said, Steph, first one is going to be around building a compute optimizer recommendation analyzer. So, we get all kinds of great detail from compute optimizer, and maybe you've seen, an opportunity within your organization to, build reporting off of that, or, look for more ways to take advantage of that data to share with teams, drive more action. So that's what we want to do first. And then the second one that we want to do is, build a solution that is going to take advantage of a new capability that came out last year around the attribute-based instance selection. And this is an API endpoint we can use to get lists of instances that meet certain criteria and meet like levels of baseline performance for specific instances. So think about this for maybe the scenario where someone's running all M5 instances in their environment. They're saying, hey, we want to run through, do some testing to modernize to a newer generation of instance. We want to figure out what's a good like kind of list of instance types to first test with, or maybe they're a spot user and they want to diversify their spot instance pool. They don't know which instance types to kind of work with. We're going to try to build a solution here that will help to give that list of instances and then pull from a bunch of different API endpoints to grab some of the pricing data so that, not only will they have the list of instance types, but they'll have some context on, how much are they going to cost? Is there savings here? Is there more performance? All that type of stuff. So we'll see. Hopefully both of these, come alive in the next, 50 minutes or so. We'll see how far.
Just before we dive in, definitely try this at home. We're going to try and put this up on a GitHub repo, the solutions that John produces. But as a reminder, Gen AI will be different for everybody. So if John puts in a prompt, you are not guaranteed to get the same response out. And always any code that it produces, please validate with your own security compliance rules and make sure it actually works. So just a little caveat there. But kicking off with the first one, John. So what's the challenge in here? Why would someone need to build this analyzer?
Yes. So, I think one of the areas is that, we get a lot of recommendations that are coming out from Compute Optimizer, and maybe I'm trying to help, a line of business figure out where to get started. So I've got a whole bunch of different recommendations, where should they focus their time to prioritize, and how do you kind of turn that list of recommendations from being just like sort of a to-do list of check boxes that you want to go through one by one to, something that's maybe like a smarter priority list. And I want to figure out a way to take a list of recommendations we have and say, hey, are there maybe multiple instance types that, all are over provisioned, and I want to, tackle that first, or is there maybe a concentration where there's the most amount of savings and I want to start there instead? And then maybe I even want to take this list and kind of like turn it into something that, feeds those recommendations back over to a set of users. So, you can kind of use your imagination as we go through. And I'd love to kind of hear from folks as we start to build this out. How could you kind of take it to the next level? Make it a Slack bot, do something cool like that with it.
Brilliant. So at the start, we've already got some Compute Optimizer data, right?
We're gonna start with that right now. We're actually gonna pull that right here. So I've got my command, which is just gonna grab me my EC2 recommendations from Compute Optimizer. And just remember that you could also use, exports that are going to an S3 bucket. We're going to kind of keep things just simple here for today, but exact same thing could work with creating, an S3 bucket, running this app, in your AWS environment or locally and having access back over to the bucket. But we're just going to pull these as, local recommendations to kind of get things going. And I think that's a good place to go with any of the vibe coding as well, is that, try to remove some variables as you get going with it, and then build and iterate on top of it versus try to boil the ocean right out of the gate. So let's make sure this works. We're going to run this command and hopefully get back a list of recommendations. Cool, that worked. I'm going to run it one more time, and I'm just going to pipe this out to a file. So I'm going to call this our EC2 recs.json. And we see our file there. I'm just going to double check it, make sure everything looks cool. Great. And now I'm going to open up that JSON file in Visual Studio Code over here. So we got a big list of it. And what I'm actually going to do is give this to Q and tell it that this is the output that we're going to be analyzing. So it's going to know the data structure, right? Like that's the cool part about this, is that we can give it all kinds of different detail and context for building the app. So I could give it, documentation for the API itself, like what's the response look like, and give it the context. Or I can just run this command, get this output, and now we're gonna have it, build our app. Cool. So I'm on OS X here, so I'm going to use the dictation feature on this, so that both like the audience can kind of hear what we're describing to Q developer to build for us. But also that this is kind of how I do it myself. The LLM, it doesn't need to have everything kind of written out perfect. You might be surprised, as we just sort of dictate into this and start describing the application that we want. It's going to handle that pretty well. So let's go through here. We're going to say
classic.
I want some help building a Python-based application to analyze my compute optimizer recommendations. And I want this to be a terminal-based or console-based application. And what it's going to do is take the JSON file as an input parameter from the command line with the application. And I want it to go through and look at the EC2 recommendations and help me group these into ways that will understand, kind of areas of opportunity for optimizing. I want to group them by things like instance family. I want to show some summaries of the details, like what is the total savings opportunity that I have within the environment? What's the total count of recommendations that I have? Show me the under provisioned, the over provisioned, and all the optimal instances that I have. And really try to give me any detail from this compute optimizer output that would help me be able to turn these into, actionable next steps for whoever owns these individual workloads. So I'm going to share the compute optimizer output, the JSON file. And I'm also going to tell you the working path that I want you to create this Python script in. So I'll give the working path next, and then I'll give the sample JSON export, and I'll have you create the first pass of this Python script. And I also want you to generate this as a report file. I want you to create a text file that has all that data in it, and also includes a timestamp on it, so I can go back and reference the report from when I created it. Okay, so that was kind of that's my sort of rambling, description of our application. And I saw in here, like, you might not need to go through and change
But
these.
the JSONs,
Yeah.
I saw that. There's another one at some point, I think.
Mostly because, I mean, I've noticed that it'll do a pretty good job of kind of figuring out what we're talking about. But
what we're talking about, it's interesting. And what's really interesting is the thing that you're almost doing in this is explaining to someone that you work with, maybe someone junior, what you want them to do with some data. And that's what it sounds like. It sounds like John's gone up to someone in the office and said, hey, we have this data. Can you go and do something with it? I want to get some data. I need it to be in this kind of format. But rather than having someone do it and spend loads of time doing it, then they just write this code for them. So that's pretty powerful. That's obviously a very long input, a lot of tokens in there. We actually had a question, which was, do you have to pay for tokens in Q? No, you don't. You just pay for the subscription fee. If this was Bedrock, then there'd be a lot of payment for the tokens going on. But this is very simple. So what's it doing now, John?
So the first thing it's doing is I gave it the path for the folder I'm going to be creating the script in, and I just allowed read-only tools outside the workspace.
I didn't know you could do that. That's cool.
What's really cool about this is past couple of months, Q developers added some capabilities to be more interactive here and control and read and write. And so you'll even see as it runs through this, it'll change execution permissions on the scripts as it writes it. It will do testing, and then it'll read the response to make sure that their response was valid. Is it returning the right value? Is it erroring? And it can help do that troubleshooting, automatic as we go through it. So starting to do its thinking now. And once it creates the first Python file, we can open it up top here. And you'll be able to see any additional changes that we make as we go through this happening kind of in real time within the code, which is really cool.
I like how when you ask it to I had a base script and I wanted it to change a bunch of stuff, and rather than me spend ages trying to figure out, I just can you just make this change? And it's plus minus, what did it change? And you can always revert the decisions, but it's very cool that it does it. And often if you ask it, it can make it into a new file. So if you want to make sure that you kind of segregate things, it will work out for you. Which is cool. And it's also summarized it. It's thinking. And then it's just I'm thinking, oh, it's done. Yeah. Oh yeah, the run thing in the console is pretty cool as well.
Really cool. Let's see here. Let me just bring up my terminal again. Okay, cool. We've got our script right here that it just wrote, and I'm going to open that up here in Visual Studio so you can see it. Let's see. I mean, this is the other beautiful part about it, right? So it's doing all the commenting in this too for the code.
Yeah.
So, you can see all the detail.
Oh, it made you a README as well. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and I mean, it's awesome. For going through and creating like all the documentation, we can ask it to create, diagrams and, explain the workflow, all that type of stuff. Let's give that a shot after we get this working. So compute optimizer analyzer, and then point it to the JSON file. Let's go back to the terminal and let's see if this will work. Okay, Python compute optimizer EC2 Rex. Cool. So it did that into a text file here. Let's see what that text file looks like. Very nice. So this is showing us here. Oh, this is cool. So we have a summary here. We've got 12 instances that are analyzed. We have total monthly savings opportunity of $223. We have 8 instances, almost 70% of those that are over provisioned, and it's giving us the breakdown, and it's actually stack ranking them here and saying that, the highest count is the C5 instances with the most savings to $148.68. Top savings opportunities, and it's giving us some details on those instance types. Over provisioned instances, giving us the count, and it's telling us our optimized ones. So that's cool, but let's go through and let's, maybe take this script to the next level. And
yeah, because at the moment it's summarizing what you could get in the console, right? I mean, if you had a bunch of exports from different people and you don't have because at the moment you can't centrally do it. If you had a bunch of different payers, and so you wanted to collect all the account data or just wanted to do it from some subset of data and you don't have access in the console, then you could of course use this. But yeah, how do we make it extra?
So I'm gonna do 2 things. The first one I'm gonna do is just make it, more interactive. And then I'm also gonna have it go through and turn some of the dollar savings from just being monthly to annualized cost. Unfortunately, my export is not looking at like a really large org, but what I would do if this was a large organization I'd create like a BU mapping table. Maybe that would be like a separate CSV file or a separate text file. And then I would take, maybe groups of linked accounts that map over to specific BUs and say, hey, I want you to go through, take, this large export of data, and I want you to reconcile it to like individual BUs and create individual reports that I can kind of send to each one of those users. And then even maybe tell it to write the Slack message for those. So I can just, send it over to users. But let's just, maybe our first step here is just to pretty this up a little bit. Let's add a few more capabilities to this this script, or rather enhancements to it. I want you to add some ASCII art at the top for the keys to AWS optimization. Put that in quotes here. And I want to make this into an interactive console app. So have it scan the working directory for any JSON files that I have and let me select the one that I want to go through and do the reporting on. And I also want to make a change to how we're showing the dollar savings totals. Let's include the monthly savings estimates, but I want to also include annualized savings. So just multiply those by 12 to show those outputs as well. And anything else we can do to make it, more visual within the console, to show some of the savings categories, any type of like visualizations within the terminal that will help us look at the groupings differently or make more sense of the data. Just go ahead and add any of those pieces in. And I want you to show the analysis just on screen in the terminal and then prompt me to go through and create that export file.
So John, when you're saying in the console, what do you mean? John, when you're saying in the console, what do you refer to?
Just meaning the terminal. Yeah.
Oh, the terminal. Okay. Interesting. What was I going to ask about? When you're doing the chat with, in the data, Do you have tags in the data?
That's a good question. Let's see if we have any tags in here.
I would just search for tags. It might be easier to do Command F. Oh, there are. So we could even bring in tags in there.
Let's do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, we could add that as the place because there's and see like can you grab any kind of tags. But yeah, let it run. We can do that on the next thing. The interest of it. The worst thing with this is when it's thinking, you're like, right, I have to riff now for some time. Don't let me forget. I need to talk about FinOps exit before we finish this session. I just remembered.
The other cool thing we've done with some of these before is tell it to, instead of just creating these plain text reports, create like a more visual HTML report export. So you could throw those into, something where someone can just navigate and hit that from, a web URL internally for your organization and be able to browse through. But I think really we want to just sort of plant the seed for folks, like, think about what you want to do with some of the data. Maybe you want to aggregate this with, other cost data that you have out there. And we'll show that in our next example of how we can go through and kind of look at some of those details there and do more API calls, enrich it, add a few more layers.
I see. The interesting, I think it's quite the Q stuff, I think as well. I really want to encourage, especially people who are non-technical FinOps practitioners who are watching, to try some of this. We're also going to have an episode later on in the season about using Q to optimize infrastructure as code and start kind of asking questions of the cost. What's also quite cool is that when you ask Q to maybe write some infrastructure as code for you, it will nearly always do it in a cost optimized way, I've noticed. So if I ask it just to make me some dummy resource, it'll be like, I've made sure to avoid any kind of cost waste. And I'm like, great, I need you to spend more money because I normally have it for a demo. But if you can ask it to be sensitive about those kind of constraints, and it will do that. Oh,
cool.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, that's another good call out too, Steph, is if you wanted to have this create, CloudFormation templates, CDK code for spinning up, sandbox environment, something for testing purposes, then give you a script at the same time to do the teardown so you don't have waste within the environment. Those are all like really cool examples. Okay, so we've created the new script. Again, let me open up the terminal here. Have our pretty graphics, and it's saying, available JSON files in the folder. We have one that we're going to pick, which is our EC2 Rex, but you can imagine, we've got a whole bunch of other files that are out there. And cool, this is cool. Performance risk breakdown, very low, 2 recommendations, medium, 6 recommendations. And this is cool. So it's given us some instance family distribution charts too, where we can see savings by instance family with some bar graphs in here. This is cool. I mean, I like
it's very old school. I like it.
I was gonna say, I just recently was watching War Games on TV, and this is giving me like, War Games throwback to, just console outputs. But that's cool. So now we've got, some visuals in here that we can look at. We've got, some outputs that we have. You could say, yes, create for me my report file. And then it's going to create that like nice timestamped version of it that we have that we could share, keep for records, keep for archive, anything like that. Cool. So we did our first version of that in about 10 minutes and then like 10 more minutes to make, some improvements on top of that. What do you think we should do next, Steph? Should we move on to...
As a time thing, how many lines of code is this created?
That's a good call. And again, I think it's a good reminder, like we didn't modify any of this code. This just, worked. So that's 500 lines.
That's a lot of lines of code. And if the thing, we've actually had a question, which is a good timely question to bring up, which is there ever an instance where a Q developer will mistakenly create code that has a bug or two? And if so, what is the provided solution? So especially for me when I've been creating things like CloudFormation templates or even Python scripts, I will run it and it will fail. Not all the time, but it does happen, especially if it's kind of an edge case scenario of what you're making. What I normally do is take the error, paste it back into queue, and it will. It's kind of a shame that we haven't had an error. Maybe we'll have one of the next one, and I'll put it into queue, and it will go, oh, I see what's happened here. Let me modify it. So that does happen, and it's very quick at realizing what it's done wrong. However, I also found myself in a rabbit hole with that, where I'm constantly doing it, and it turns out that you can't do something. So I had something where I was trying to look at tagging for what is it, quick start subscriptions, and it kept doing it, and I was like, the data's not right, and I kept coming back to it, and I kept saying it's wrong, and then it turned out you can't actually tag, or you can tag, but I couldn't get the extract the data for the tags of the quick start users, something like that. And so what happens is Q is trying as much as it possibly can to give me what I want, but if it doesn't exist, it can't figure out how to say that it doesn't exist. So just be mindful. What we haven't also checked in here is, John, can we optimize this code? Would there be a way of, can we say to Q, can you make this more efficient in terms of, I make this more of an efficient algorithm? Because one thing, or efficient code, that might be quite an interesting prompt to jump in. Because I see that quite a lot. Is like it spits out tons of code, and you're like, right, let's make this a bit more compressed. Would that be a good prompt?
Yeah, let's ask it. Let's tell it we want to add in the tags, and also, see if there's any recommendations for optimizing the code.
And we also have a request from the audience, which is add, shall we play a game when the user first runs the script? Can you add that as well in there for Travis?
So let's make a second iteration of this code, create just a separate Python file, and we have a few different changes that we want to make. The first one that we want to do is we want to add in any kind of tagging context that we have from the Compute Optimizer recommendations. And then to just kind of add a playful spin on this, can you also prompt the user to say, do you want to play a game? And see if you can create ASCII art of Jigsaw from the Saw movies. And also give me a list of any types of recommendations that we have for making this code more efficient. Also, could you create a README file in the working directory that we have and include context on what the script does, how someone should use it, and any other kind of design details?
All right. It's quite funny to think about how far this has all come. And one thing is things like we have, if people don't know as well, let me make sure we bring this up. If you don't know, we write a summary of the episodes that we do using AI, and they're all posted on here on the live stream. So go to that page. You can see all of our historical content at the last bit. So if you want a written down version of each of our episodes, that's the go. To think back, like when you first made that, John, there was a lot of probably like manual coding, and now you probably could have made that so much faster with using Q. And
Totally.
these things have changed so much.
It's really wild. It's just, it's awesome, especially when you have, things that you see that you'd like to do, within your organization, or you see what those paper cuts are, the tedious tasks, and you want to find a better way to do that. Having these scripts go through and do that for you, it's just so cool.
Yeah. And we've had some other prompts as well, so we can stick with this one. We'll let this one finish out before we continue. And where's my
and Steph, you were talking about errors and stuff before. I think one of the ones that can be a frustrating one for people, whether they're coding with just kind of on their own, or they're running somebody else's code. It's like maybe I have a different Bodo version, or maybe I have a different version of the AWS CLI and the script's not running locally on my system, or I've got like a path that's set up wrong, or those are like the ones that always seem to, kind of present themselves. And you've got a script that's dependent on like a very specific version of Bodo or the CLI, and it doesn't work. And when you get the outputs from those errors here, and you give it back to Q, it's going to help you figure out, well, maybe I should, I've got to change the syntax for, how I'm doing this based on like what your system looks like locally, or it'll tell you to go through and like upgrade, to a newer version of Bodo. So makes a lot of those like really frustrating parts where, you know, you're going to have a hard time troubleshooting them maybe on your own. Makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to bring up a question as well, or a suggestion. Let me pull this up. Can it code with any prompts? Oh wait, no, sorry, wrong one. Is there a way to prompt Q to include if it can't do something or something isn't possible? That's probably a good thing to add at the start of your code if you're not really sure. John, have you tried this?
No, I don't think I have.
I think that's a good way. I think that's a good suggestion there. Need to start to encourage it. The other thing you can do as well, I didn't mention this, is that you can tell Q if it did a good job or not. And I also think that feeding back the errors is very handy and it learns more. In the console as well, you can give it a little like thumbs up, thumbs down if it does well. So I really encourage you, like anomalies section, like tell it what it's doing well and what could be improved. All right, so what's it done? Doing our new version.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to be careful with too. I'm thinking more about that scenario of things that are impossible or can't do, because we got to keep in mind that like with the LLMs, you know, that's where we could start to see, you know, hallucinations or unexpected behaviors, because it's going to try to still make things happen that maybe it doesn't think that it can. So think about, you know, maybe what some of the error checking mechanisms are that you might want to put into your code. And that's something that I like a lot about working with Q developers, that you can tell it to add those things in, and you know, it's not the same amount of effort that it would take for you to write that code yourself. So have to put in a lot of checks and balances, put in all kinds of extra stuff on top of that. Okay, do we want to play a game?
Yes, Travis, we do. Oh, is that
all right?
That's
Jigsaw. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Wow. Okay, that's can we squid? Folks in the chat, can you see Jigsaw or not?
I don't know.
I've now forgotten what he looks like, but I do not think that is good.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there, but cool.
Maybe Q's like, he doesn't like horror films, so it's like, who's Jigsaw? You know, it's just trying.
Oh, tags that were found. Okay, cool. So 10 instances. It found these tags on 2 instances, 1 instance, another. Cool. It found the auto scaling group name for this one, which is a test ASG. So maybe we would want to tell it like, hey, this is a case where we have the auto scaling group name set as a cost allocation tag. Maybe we would want to have it create a separate report and say any auto scaling groups that have optimization recommendations, I want to group those separately, because those might not be just straight up, you know, vertical right sizing, you know, exercises. Maybe I would want to look at scaling thresholds, or, you know, what the scaling policy is for that ASG, instead of just doing vertical right sizing on it. So that's a really good call out. And, you know, to add the tags in, because you kind of never know what you're going to find until we start to look through the data and explore it a little bit more closely.
Awesome. Would you say any tips? Yes. Is that going to give you, did you suggest it do that? Would you like to see code optimization tips?
I'm surprised it put that in here into the app. But
yeah, it must have just interpreted it in that way. That's interesting. Use multiple. The question is this suggested RDS RIs? Because savings plans for RDS.
So when we ran our first command using Compute Optimizer, we got the output just for EC2, but we definitely do the same thing. And maybe that would be something that you'd want to add in as a pre-process in the script. Tell it, you know, before you go through and run the script, I want you to loop through and run each one of my output commands here. Because if you look right here, we're looking at get EC2 instance recommendations. You can do the same thing here to modify this for RDS or EBS, Lambda, ASGs. So you could tell it, hey, pre-process, I want you to go through, pull all the recommendations, timestamp them, and then give me that list that I can then sort through and create a new iteration of each script, you know, that can kind of account for whatever the schema is in those outputs. Because that's going to look a little bit different for each one. We'll have, you know, different metrics for EBS versus RDS. So you'd have to do a couple kind of extra steps there to get it to, you know, sort of create a new version for each one of those outputs. But yeah, obviously totally possible.
Yeah, and we've had a couple of people in the chat. For for the jigsaw, the terrible jigsaw drawing, that's a stretch for jigsaw, and it kind of looks like Santa or a wrestler's mask. So I think in consensus, it was not very successful, but at least it tried. And we've had a couple of other questions I want to bring up. So how many lines of code are in the second version? Want to know? Let's see.
And I don't think it implemented the recommendations. So I think this is going to be more. I'm just looking at the file size right now. Also, this is this is taking up a couple of lines. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, we added in about 110 lines in this next version. And we can continue to play with it and tell it to try to get that line count down.
For sure.
Go through and do that.
We need to optimize it. And we have another question, which is it possible to connect Q with my GitLab, GitHub repo to make the updates on code there? I believe there is a way to integrate it. I'm going to drop a link in the chat. You can do it. John, have you seen people do this?
Not firsthand. Yeah, it's not one I've done myself.
So I think that you can integrate it with your GitHub actions according to that blog. Maybe that's something we could do next time. I think that would be quite fun. But yeah, check out that link in the chat for how to do that. And here we go. There's another good question. Can we ask you to compare both versions on code efficiency and memory management? That's a good prompt.
Yeah, that's a great one. Like I said, I don't think it implemented our changes, the efficiency changes to how to do the to give it a true comparison. Because what I'm reading here is, let's see, it will offer the code optimization recommendations, but it hasn't actually implemented them in these versions.
Can we ask it to? Can you implement the recommendations?
Code optimization recommendations.
Yeah. See what.
All right, let's go ahead and make a third version that is going to be an optimized version of our V2. So I want you to implement, any of those code optimizations that you recommend to shorten it, make it more efficient, both like more concise from a code perspective, but also want it to go through and be more efficient with, local resources on the host.
We have to come up with something that's going to be like a fun thing that happens.
We're working with like a really small data set here too, but we've done up ones that have really large data sets. And we just did one, kind of with our team recently where we were using like a Streamlit based app to create a web app using Python code that was analyzing some really large data sets. And that was
guys, I don't know if John can hear me. Can you? Yeah, I don't think he can hear me when he's doing the chat.
And then also Streamlit caching inside of it to improve the performance.
I feel like I should take advantage of this.
That's really cool to kind of see it go through and do those types of optimizations with caching. And of course, I'm still rambling here, so let me stop this. Let's see.
Let's see if it stopped. John? Nope. I think he's still dictating. I don't know if you guys use dictate, but I feel like it cuts out the sound. And so John's probably just got it cut out, doesn't he? I wonder if I can catch his thing. John is vibe.
Yeah, I'm vibing too hard.
Can you hear me, John?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So when you dictate, you can't hear me. And so when you were just dictating all that stuff, the chat can hear me just That's why Travis said you were vibe coding too hard, because everyone can hear both of us, but you can't hear me, which is very funny. Excellent. Oh my god, so funny. And let's have a look at this question, which is, can we use Q to structure our code and split it into different files, folders, and give meaningful names? Yes, definitely. I think breaking these things up and use it, especially that kind of a concept where that's stuff that I love the idea of using this Gen AI kind of features where instead of it doing like not all the creative fun stuff, like not all of the interesting work, but the stuff that maybe you didn't have time for. So the READMEs are a really good example of that, where it goes off, or like you said, splitting up this code, giving things good names, stuff where you're like, it's fine, I'll get to it, or you never actually get to it. allowing you to do all this stuff for you will just hopefully speed up processes and help things like handovers and stuff like that. All right, so it's made us a nice little README, which is very handy.
This is our nice little README file. Tag context, visual representation, actionable insights. Cool.
Perfect. All right, we've got 15 more minutes. What else do we want to do, or do we want to try looking at something else?
This is going to finish up running. I think we should talk about the second use case and see if that's one that we can do, because a few of the pieces we talked about earlier with, like error handling, things like that are ones that we may run into, with our second use case, since it has more API dependencies and we're not just working with a local file. So I kind of go back to like what the use case actually is. And this is one where we want to go through and identify, cost efficient instances for running a workload. And I'm going to give an example here of the command that uses the attribute-based instance selection. And there's a few ways you can use attribute-based instance selection. You can use it directly within your ASGs, so that, it's going to go through and just grab instances based on the attributes you define. But you can also use the command in the API endpoint to just retrieve a list of those instance types. So that's like a little bit more of like, from a FinOps persona, I want to go through and just get the list of instance types. And, I'm curious if any of the folks out there have ever had that question of, someone's running, previous generation instance. They want to know, what should I move to? Well, sometimes we want to just move to the latest generation. Sometimes we want to explore, different processor types. And then if we're in the spot world, sometimes we can get better spot rates on, network optimized or other types of instances that are kind of within the same family. And that's what we're going to show here, to go through and create.
Awesome.
So let me go through. I'm going to try not to vibe too hard this time and see if we can, describe this just like we did on the last one.
Good.
So we're going to build another terminal or console-based Python script that's going to use a AWS CLI command for getting instance types from instance requirements. This is part of the attribute-based instance selection. And what I want to do is have the user provide interactively an instance type. And then we're going to use that. We'll grab just the prefix for it. So, whatever's before the period in the instance name, we're going to extract that, substring, the prefix of the instance family, and we're going to put that into the section under baseline performance factors for the instance family field. And this is going to return a list of instance types that, have the same level of baseline performance as whatever the user, provided as an input for their current, instance type. And I'll give an example of what the command looks like right here from the AWS CLI.
Right.
I'm kind of setting us up for an error here. I think we're going to get that.
People are saying it's a long prompt. I think there's a bit of an element with the prompts as well. The more detail you give it, I saw something that said, someone said, the more tokens you have, the longer wait time you have, because it's going to be taking the time to break everything down into tokens, process what you've said, and then provide the solution. If you just wrote, write code to analyze this data, it will, but it won't be very good. So bearing in mind, like, you're giving it the exact amount of data is going to be something you need to kind of work on, especially if every single time you're like, oh, it produces it in a TXT, I want it in a CSV. Make sure you lay that out on what you have in there. Let's create the path in that file, give it in the right place. But it's thinking. Yeah, go on, John.
No, I was going to say, put it in our previous working path. So I'm just going to make a change and have it go through and do it here instead.
Yeah, good example of it will do what you've been telling it to do. So it's got that chat history as well. So even though it's opened up a new chat, I don't know. I'm assuming if it can, I don't know if it can carry stuff over from previous chats if you break them up. I'm not even really sure. Worth experimenting on. The last thing, we've got 10 more minutes, so we'll just keep kind of ticking boxes with these. But any other questions, comments, please put them in the chat. And as always, if you have anything you want to follow up with us on us, please email costoptimization@amazon.com. And if you're enjoying this video, make sure that you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel you are watching us on to stay up to date with all these kind of cool kind of videos. John, while you're doing that, actually, I want to do a quick last poll before we move on. Let's add this to stage. So do you want, everyone who's watching, do you want more episodes like this for us to build stuff? Or do you want us to just keep doing more chatting episodes? We've been doing this for a long time. I'm thinking about next season pulling in some more kind of technical episodes like this where we do some actual coding and some chat about coding versus actually just discussing the world of FinOps. Okay, overwhelmingly, it seems like everyone wants us to stay in the go for some coding. I love that. That's great. That's what I wanted to do. And Pete's even put building is awesome. So that's great. So next season, I will be checking out some ideas for building out some code. What I want to do is look at code or solutions that I want to create similar to this, and we can work out how to do it. And we'll inevitably try and put this on GitHub repos so you can do it. And Pete says it's something that real you can take away. Someone's also asked, are we live? Yes, we are live. We've got 10 more minutes before we wrap up today's episode, but we are live chatting about using generative AI to write code, something which is everyone has passion about. So, back to John. Glad to see that the chat is overwhelmingly positive about doing more of these episodes. If you're watching us on demand, comment in the chat if you want us to keep making some more of these more technical deep dive episodes, and we will continue to do that. Let's see, what else have we got in the chat? John, someone's requested, can we see the version 3 from the previous prompt about efficiency? Can we still go back to do that?
Oh yeah, let's check those out. So right now it's going through and doing our script, and if you saw, there was an error that came up, and that was one, again, I'd expected that, so we wanted it to switch from using the CLI to using Boto 3. We'll see if that's going to go through and fix the error, and we had it kind of do a couple other changes here. We'll revisit those in a second, but let's go back and look at our V3, and here, I'll actually bring this over so you all can see this right now. Our V2, 26K. Our V3 was down to 18K, so there's definitely a reduction in the lines of code. Let's bring this up.
Can we ask it to compare between V2 and V3, what the big difference is?
See how many lines we have here. So tick off about 100 lines of code.
Yeah.
Oh, so not only was it just a reduction in the amount of lines, it says it, V2 is single-threaded processing, multi-processing to support analyze instances in parallel. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Function optimization, cleaner, more modular code, memory efficiency. It stored the full instance objects in the results. This extracted only the needed data from the instances, reducing memory usage. That's cool. No caching. This one added caching in the functions.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Added type hints. Code conciseness 600 down to 400, 33% reduction. Condensed banner that uses less screen space. Focused outputs versus more verbose output.
Wow, it did tons.
It was busy. It was busy.
Yeah. And just to summarize on that, is if anybody out there has a lot of Lambda functions, or just generally about, I feel like Lambda is a good example of when you could use this. I'd be like, here's my Lambda code, because it's based on time and memory, make that more efficient. So can you do that in there and tell it, I'm using this for a Lambda function. I have these dependencies. What is the best setup? And ask kind of these questions. Definitely go and check that out. Right. 2 more minutes on this before we wrap up, John, on the second prompt.
Cool. So we had to go through and taken. I'll just run through this one more time so everyone can see it. But what we're doing is providing it with an instance type, our M5 2 extra large, giving it a region. It's going to default to US East 1. And now what it's done here is found 25 instance types with similar baseline performance to the M5 family CPU. And what I've done with this in some previous testing, I think we're probably running into our time limit here, but was kind of iterating on this with like a next version where we said, hey, create a table view. If you've used the EC2 instance selector in the past, we created like kind of a customized version of it for our use case where we're pulling in, multiple pricing options. So if you're using 3-year no upfronts or, 1 year all upfront, whatever it might be, have it add columns and details for that, and then let it go through and, create CSV exports that you could then use for building out offering lists and EKS, all kinds of cool stuff like that. But I think the neat part about this is that you've got the option of kind of like identifying a problem and then dialing in the app exactly to what your use case is. And what we'll go ahead and do too is we'll try to get these up on GitHub so we can share out the code and, our final iterations of these so folks can kind of play around with them and, use the email alias that we have here, Steph, to let folks kind of let us know what maybe like to see us build again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody want any suggestions, please email customization@amazon.com, especially if you have a challenge that you're like, I wish I had some code that did this and you're not really technically even got the skills. I mean, first of all, try Q for yourself, definitely. But if you have any solutions, one thing I'm thinking about is maybe some automated reporting from Kerr. We might look at some other integrations with things like Q, maybe some notifications from budget, a couple of different bits that we want to look into. The very last thing I want to do is talk about FinOps X before we finish. Lastly, let's go for this. If you're coming to FinOps X, I am doing not 1 but 2 speaking sessions at the conference. The first one is on Tuesday at 4:14. I meant 4:15 p.m. about adapting your FinOps playbook for generative AI. We're loving the Gen AI and talking a lot about how the tools and mechanisms that you guys normally use, how they apply to things like Gen AI. And we'll go through some things about cost optimization and cost visibility to make sure you guys have the skills and knowledge to do that yourselves. Secondly, on that, we also have a session with me and Justin about advanced analytics with cost and use reports. If you saw this session at reInvent or have watched it on the YouTube channel, this is going to be a different version. We'll have brand new queries. We'll be updating some of those queries. So this will be not a duplicate, but a different session. These both are in the Amazon room. The first one you can see on the agenda. The second one you can't see on the agenda, but is happening. But make sure you stop by the booth. Come say hi. I'm going to be at the conference the whole week, so come say hi. And yeah, just make sure to check out those sessions at that time. Okay, that is it from us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Chat, thank you so much for getting involved. Great to see all of the different chatter and suggestions. People that have just put in the chat that they're not at FinOps X, we'll make sure that we have a recording of the session, so we'll post that online. So make sure you follow me on LinkedIn and we'll post everything there. Thank you so much for joining. We hope you've enjoyed the channel. We'll be on next week. And my mind has gone blank. What's happening next week? Oh, next week we're getting some announcements. So that's all I can say so far. So make sure that you stay up to date and subscribe to all the channels. And we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.